everyone. Thanks for joining us this weekend in Studio 45. Last weekend we kicked off a brand new big idea, which is Initiative, and it has a really cool space theme. So we thought instead of playing a game this week, we would have a fun activity for you guys to do that's kind of like a rocket. So here's what you're gonna need. You're gonna need some string, you're gonna need a balloon, and you're gonna need a straw. And here's what you do. So the first step, if you want, is actually you can decorate your balloon to look like a rocket ship, or for me, I'm just gonna put on a smiley face here. Okay, so the next step will be to thread your string. I'm using yarn, but you can use any type of string, and you're gonna thread it through your straw. Next, you're going to tie off your string. So we're just using mic stands, but you can use this anywhere in your house that has the length. Just make sure it's pretty tight when you tie it off. This one you might need some help with. You gotta blow up your balloon. The more air you have in it, the more fuel you have in your rocket. Have someone hold the air thing closed, don't tie it off, and you're gonna tape it to your straw on your string, just like that. Okay guys, it's time for liftoff. So get ready, count it down with me. 3, 2, 1. Hey, that was awesome. It made it all the way across the stage. Well, we hope you guys had fun with that. And if you did it at home, post some pictures with your parents' permission and tag us in it so we can see the fun you guys are having learning about Initiative at home. But right now, we're gonna check in with Mr. Jesse and another story about Nehemiah.
The Bible is more than a single book. It's a collection of 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry written by dozens of different authors over thousands of years that all come together to tell one big story. It's a bigger story than you can even imagine. It's a big story about a really big God and what He did to rescue us. It shows us who we are and what we were created to do. Discover the story that shows you the character of God.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to be able to tell you our story today. It's all about initiative, seeing what needs to be done and doing it. I hope you guys had fun making your rocket with Sarah. And isn't it interesting, because if you hadn't had the straw and you hadn't had the string, you could let go of the balloon, but it doesn't really end up where you're wanting it to go. It just sort of flies around without focus, right? Well, that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today. How can we be more like the rocket you guys made, where we have a destination in mind? And how does that have to do with initiative, seeing what needs to be done and doing it? Now, today we are talking about the same guy you talked about last week. His name is Nehemiah. So if you'd like, you can turn to the book of the Bible with the same name as his, Nehemiah. It's in the Old Testament. And today we're going to be looking at chapter 5. Now, last week, Debbie kicked off the story, and we're going to be talking about Nehemiah all month long. And the thing I love about Nehemiah is Nehemiah definitely showed initiative. But before we get to that story, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself and also how that balloon has to do with our story today. Like I said, because I didn't have the string and because I didn't have the straw, when I let go of it, just kind of flew around. It was crazy. It didn't have direction, right? And sometimes, if I'm going to be honest, I feel like that myself. Okay, so this last week, we actually weren't here in Kansas. My wife, myself, and our middle son, August, went to Disney World. We had a great time. It was really, really fun. It's very special. But can I be honest for just a second? What's interesting to me whenever we take our kid to a place like Disney World is it's really hard for them to hear me. Do you know what I'm saying? There's just all kinds of stuff going on, Disney craziness. And I caught myself several times, I would say, August, but he couldn't hear me. In fact, it was like his ears weren't working at all. And I think a lot of it was because there was just so much going on. And I'd have to say, August. And then finally he would see me, and then his ears would start working and he would hear me. And I'm curious, that's kind of what I've experienced recently, but has that ever happened to you? In fact, why don't you just take a few minutes, you can pause the video, I promise I'll be here when you get back, and just talk about this with whoever you're watching the video with. Has there ever been a time when it's like you were so focused on what was happening in front of you or around you that it's like your ears stopped working. Or another way this might look is you're so focused on something that you're doing. You're playing your favorite video game. You're reading your favorite book. You're watching your favorite TV show, whatever it might be. You're so focused on what you are doing that you aren't paying attention to the things that or the people that are around you. Talk about that for just a second. Okay, I hope you had a good conversation. I hope you paused it and actually started that conversation. Remember, in Studio 45, we really want you to be a part of the conversation about what it means to put this big idea into practice. And I think it's important for us to realize that sometimes we can be so focused on what's going on in front of us or our needs that we forget the things that are happening around us. We forget about a person. I know for me, it hasn't just happened to me as a dad, but I remember as a kid, there'd be times where I'd be really into my book. And I'd look up and my mom would say, "Didn't you hear me?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't hear you at all." And maybe that's happened to you. You've been playing one of your favorite video games and you look up and your dad's saying, "Didn't you hear me?" And you're like, "What? I didn't even know you were talking to me." And let's talk about that for a second. Now, before we get into how do we handle that and how do we see what needs to be done and do it, how do we practice initiative when sometimes it's hard to focus, before we get into all that, let's catch up on Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah chapter 5, last week, Debbie talked about Nehemiah, how Nehemiah was an Israelite. The thing was, God's chosen people were the Israelites, and their stories in the Old Testament, but they had been taken into captivity by the Babylons, okay? And so Nehemiah lived in a different place. He wasn't with the Israelites. He was cupbearer, though, to a king now. And this king was very important because this king was actually going to be somebody that would allow Nehemiah to go back home. Now, one thing you should know about the old cities and stuff. Oh, back then they had walls that were around their cities. And so Jerusalem, which was kind of the capital city for the Israelites, it would have had a big wall around it. But Nehemiah, remember, he's cupbearer. Nehemiah's cupbearer, and he hears that the wall that was once there when they were taken into captivity had been knocked down. And so knocked down that it was in shambles. In fact, Nehemiah hears that even though some Israelites have been allowed to return to Jerusalem, that actually the wall is still in shambles. And there's not even a brick on top of another brick. I mean, it's just totally torn down. And this breaks Nehemiah's heart because he knows that it's hard for the Israelite people to be safe, to be secure, if they don't even have a wall around their city. It was hard for them to know that enemies weren't going to come in and surprise them and attack them in the middle of the night because they didn't have a city to protect them. And so he goes to the king because he's cupbearer, sort of like a really important security guard. And he said, "Hey, I'm sad because my home people, the Israelites, they don't have security." And so the king gives him letters and gives him supplies, and he sends Nehemiah. And as we heard last week, Nehemiah goes and he surveys the damage that's been done. A lot of this, first, before Nehemiah even started on the job, he had to see what needed to be done. And so he's looking around and he's seeing all the things that need to happen. And then he gives an inspiring speech to the people that are in charge. He says, "Listen, we're going to build this wall. We're going to work together, and we're going to give the Israelites security. It's going to be great." And because of that, guess what? Nehemiah starts work on the wall. He takes initiative. This is great. He sees what needs to be done, and this would have been a really slow process, right? Brick by brick by brick by brick, they start building back up, and they divide the wall by family, and so everybody kind of has one piece that they're able to manage and build up. But if you read the story of Nehemiah, you hear about how there was a guy named Sanballat and Tobiah. They were not Israelites, but they didn't want the Israelites having security. They liked the fact they didn't have a wall, so they try to tear the Israelites down. They're just making fun of them and saying, "Oh, if a fox were to run on that wall, it'd fall down." And they are constantly making fun again and again and again. And Nehemiah he doesn't even give him the time of day. He keeps working. He keeps at it. He says, "Hey, I got a job to do, and I'm going to keep going." And so the people, of course, follow Nehemiah's advice. They say, "Hey, we could listen or we could not listen." Yeah, how about that? We're just going to put on headphones and keep working. Okay, I don't know if they put on headphones, but they keep working. Now, it looked like progress on the wall was going to keep happening. This is great. Brick after brick, this wall is being built. But Nehemiah runs into another problem. And the thing is, this time, the problem is actually inside the city walls. It's not from an outsider. It comes from an insider. Listen to this. Some men and their wives, this is in chapter 5, some men and their wives cried out against their Jewish brothers and sisters. Some of them were saying, there are now many of us, we have many sons and daughters, we have to get some grain so that we can eat and stay alive. Okay, Nehemiah's focus is right here. We have got to get a wall built. Can I ask you something? Earlier, we were showing you how to make a rocket. Did anybody happen to see this photo? I mean, think about it. Somebody comes to Nehemiah, okay? There's a group of people that go to Nehemiah, and they go to him and say, hey, we've got this problem, right? And guess what? These people come and say, hey, we need your help. Now, what's interesting about this photo is this photo was actually in our video earlier. It was right here. Isn't that funny? Now, did you see it before, or did you pass by it? See, the truth is, Nehemiah could have passed by it. He has got work to do. He's trying to build the wall. But these people come to Nehemiah and they say, hey, listen, we need your help. They said this, we're being forced to sell our fields, our vineyards, and our homes. We have to do it to buy grain. There isn't enough food for everyone. Still others were saying, listen, we've had to borrow money. We need to pay the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. But here was what was interesting. Is these people that needed food to eat, and there was more Israelites there. They had come from the foreign lands they'd been taken to. They'd come back home, and they were helping build the wall, and now they have to feed all these people. Well, to do it, they're borrowing money. In fact, they're borrowing money from nobles and other Jewish people. But those Jewish people were charging high interest. Now, if you don't know what interest is, basically it would be like if I borrowed $10 from you. Man, I really appreciate it. I could really use that $10. And I say, hey, I can pay it back to you next week. But next week when I come with my $10, you say, okay, you actually owe me 15 now. 10 is for what you borrowed, and 5 of it is interest. Well, so now I have to pay back the 10 that I borrowed, that I really needed, and I also have to pay you the 5. Now, for these people, this was really, really hard. I mean, this was really, really challenging. They were trying to build the wall. They couldn't go get a job, right? They were trying to build the wall during the day, and then they also had to find a way to work and earn money so they could pay the interest that they needed so that their family could eat. Now, is this Nehemiah's problem? Well, I don't know, not really. I mean, that's not why he left his job as cupbearer. He left because he needed to build this wall, and the wall is being built. That's what he should focus on, right? But Nehemiah stops. Okay, now I know I asked you if you saw the first one. I'm curious, did you see this one? Okay, this one was in our video earlier too, when Sarah was making the rocket. Did you see it in the background and wonder, hey, I wonder what that's for? This is Nehemiah, and this is Nehemiah saying, God, what do I need to do about this? Because the truth is, God's word tells us, in fact, Nehemiah tells us, because this is kind of like his personal journal, he says that he had to get away and think about this. Okay, wait a second, I need to figure out if this, what I'm supposed to do. In fact, he actually tells us he was actually really angry about this at first, that his Jewish brothers were doing this to their own people. And so he gets away, he thinks about it, he prays about it, and then decides, you know what? This is what I am focused on, but this is a bigger deal. So Nehemiah stops construction on the wall. The hammers get dropped, the saws get put away, and everybody stops. And he says, construction will not continue until we get this fixed. Isn't that amazing? Nehemiah left. He told his boss, the king, this is what he needed to be working on. But when he saw people in need, he stopped everything. Okay, last picture. We tried to sneak this in earlier. Did you see this one? This one is Nehemiah and a noble is what it is a picture of. And the reason why we had this in the background is because even though this seemed to be the priority for Nehemiah, he stopped everything and he said, listen, we need to talk about this with the nobles. And he did. Listen to this in Nehemiah chapter 5. He tells them this, okay? And it's really interesting too, because you can kind of see this come to life. He calls the nobles together and he says, our Jewish brothers and sisters were sold to other nations. We've done everything we could to buy them back and bring them home. But look at what you're doing. You're actually selling your own people. Now we're going to have to buy them back too. I mean, they kept quiet. They couldn't think of anything to say. So he said, what you're doing isn't right. You should not be doing this. Shouldn't you show respect to our God? Shouldn't you live in a way that will keep our enemies from saying bad things about us? I am lending the people money and grain. So are my relatives and my men. This is Nehemiah. But we have to stop charging interest. Give the people's fields back to them. Give them back their vineyards, their olive groves, their houses. Do it right away. Give everything back to them. And also give them back the 1% on the money, grain, fresh wine, and olive oil you've charged them. And the nobles respond. They say, all right, we'll give it back. And we won't require anything more than them. We'll do exactly as you say. Nehemiah is very honest with the nobles. He's saying, listen, because you are charging them interest, some of them are having to sell their own kids just so that they can give them enough food to eat. This isn't right. We have to take care of one another. And we're working hard to build this wall, and I need you guys to help us. And so Nehemiah tells the nobles they got to do this. They got to help them. They agree. But Nehemiah tells them, hey, I'm going to make you promise in front of the priests. And Nehemiah's going to hold them accountable. So he gets the priest there. He has them promise. They give the food back, okay? And they make sure that they can give the land back that they had taken. And they say, hey, okay, we're going to give you all this stuff back. And of course, all the Israelites that were worried about food are super happy now. Yeah, okay, that's great. They're super happy because now they don't have to worry about are they going to be able to eat. They know they can eat, and construction on the wall can start again. And it does. Nehemiah had to stop what he was focused on for a season, for a moment, because there was something that wasn't right in front of him, but it was very, very important. And I love this. He makes the priests and the officials promise to do what they said. And he also shook out my pocket and emptied them. And he said, someone might decide not to keep this promise they made. If that happens, may God shake them out of their house. He says, hey, listen, God is going to hold us accountable to this. And the whole community said amen. Now, that is the next kind of chapter. There's several chapters in the book of Nehemiah. But in the story of Nehemiah that we're telling, that's the next chapter. But I think it's an important chapter because it teaches us an important and valuable lesson. And that is this. Initiative is seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And the truth is, there are a lot of things that need to be done. There are a lot of things that you need. And there's a lot of things that you need to do. You need to do your homework. You need to help do the chores around the house. You need to help out and do what you're expected to do at school and on the soccer field or at dance class or whatever other responsibilities you might have. An initiative is saying, hey, I'm going to see what needs to be done and doing it. But I want to challenge you because when we're talking about initiative, it's more than just getting things done. In fact, sometimes it's caring for other people. In fact, one of our big three is I should treat others the way I wanted to be treated. And as Nehemiah continued to finish building the wall, he made sure that not only did they do what they needed to do, but they did it how they needed to do it. They showed others that they were going to treat them the way they wanted to be treated. They made the wise choices. And they trusted God and they showed God they loved God by loving the people he made. And the truth is for you, and I hope you hear this, if you see someone that's being treated unfairly, if you see someone that's getting bullied at school, if you see your teacher having to clean up their classroom all by themselves, if you see your mom night after night have to wash the dishes by herself, step up and do something. see what needs to be done, and do it. That is what is so important, because just like Nehemiah, he couldn't get to the things that he needed to do unless he was treating the people the way he needed to treat them. And he made sure that those that he was working alongside were doing it as well. It's an incredibly big idea. And when we practice this kind of initiative, we can change the world. In fact, I can think of one great way you can do this right now. There are a lot of people in your world, maybe in your neighborhood, or maybe that go to your school, that need to hear the story of Jesus. They need it. They need it as badly as the people that Nehemiah was serving alongside needed food. And what if you took the opportunity to share this video with them, or to invite them to attend NewSpring on the weekend? Or you could invite them to NewSpring in the park. It's coming up September 23rd. It's going to be a blast. We're going to have an awesome time, and we would love to see you there with some friends. Or if you wanted to, you can invite them to come to NewSpring the weekend after that. We're kind of making that a big blowout, a friendship weekend. We're going to have a lot of fun and some fun surprises here. And the reason why I say that is because initiative is seeing what needs to be done. And for some of you, we just need to stop and look around and wonder, not necessarily what do we need to see, but who do we need to see? And how can we love them like Jesus did? That is a powerful form of initiative. Because just like we had these pictures in our video, it's easy to miss things when they're in the background. But Jesus didn't miss people. He called attention to them, and he made sure to see them. And I hope and I pray that you do the same this week. Let me pray for you. God, I pray for all these kids that they see the people you have put in their life, and they serve them and they love them the way you did, the way you used Nehemiah to do, and the way that I know each and every one of these kids can. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for joining us this weekend with the big idea of initiative. We've had a great time talking about that. But right now it is time to reveal the question. Today's question is this: who do you see being treated unfairly? So take some time to talk about it as a family or whoever you're watching this with, and we'll see you guys next weekend.